Good morning, everyone. How you doing today? Well, good morning for me. Not really good morning. It's morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. How you doing today? Good, bad, terrible, all of that? Yeah, we're all there. It's frustrating. It is a day. It is another day. Another day supporting this club. Another day of going in circles, another day of doing the same shit we've always done. But how are we all today? How are you guys feeling this morning? Do you feel any different between today and yesterday? I'm just going to move this a wee bit closer. Do any of you feel any different between today and yesterday? Leroy, welcome to the Pro Muppet. Well, I can't. My eyes are shot today. Apologies. I'm trying to read the chat and I just can't. How are you? How are you? Thank you, Leroy. Welcome to the membership and all of that. I appreciate it. You're more angry. We're not getting relegated. I don't think we'll get relegated either. Sunday live, we're fucked, aren't we? Yeah. It feels awful. It feels worse. Yeah. Well, I want to talk obviously about a few things. Oops, I bumped my mic cord. I hope it's not crackling. If it does, hopefully it'll be okay in a second here. Yeah, look, I mean, yesterday I woke up at 5:30 a.m. to watch that game. Trust me, those are the days that really hurt me. They really hurt. Before we actually get going, I'm curious. Meritocracy is winning. Better run clubs with better assembled squads are winning. True. And he wants to know what's going on in the background. If they think things are improving, they'll keep him. Let them decide, not angry fans. Well, yeah, we'll talk about that. I want to know the mood, not because it's going to influence the way that I think or anything like that, because it doesn't. I'm always going to be myself, but I do want to know what you guys think. Back now. Let's see. I do want to know where at least my chat is on this before I speak, or at all, because I am quite curious. I really don't. I want to just know where you guys are at. I don't want to get into the into being too toxic about it, but I am curious where the chat is at right now. Wow. A lot worse than I thought. I'm surprised. I was gonna say I'd be surprised if it actually is a majority that want him to leave right now, but yeah. Remain behind Amorim on the condition he begins to routinely play Heaven, Euro, Lamans, and anybody but Dallo at wing back. Playing young, hungry players will buy Ruben Amorim time. I completely agree with that, Leroy. I completely agree with that. He needs the season. In fact, I think he needs another window. Fair. Okay. Some time ago, it was reported that Ineos had reset Amorim's evaluation start date. Rehashing the same old debate after a losing game is boring. I don't disagree, Ed. Like, in terms of reality. If we don't win convincingly against Sunderland, consider it during the break. Should that matter? Should that single game matter? Should that mean anything at all? Back him now? What's the wait for? I mean, I don't know. Good question. Stop playing players from the past. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, I think that where I stand on this that I'll kind of discuss today is that ultimately I think it's somewhat pointless, the whole discussion. I'm a little bit apathetic towards it. You know? One, I don't think changing managers mid-season does us any good. If you were to do that, once again, you would be ideally getting the right person, but who is the right person? Are they available? Can you get them? Can you do all of that? That's one question. The second question is, I don't know. I'm just apathetic about the situation in general. About Amorim as well, I'm fairly apathetic after yesterday. I have very, very, very huge complaints, but they're the same complaints I've had for the longest time that I'm really, really worried about. That is right. We should be always on crisis mode. We hired the guy to build a team, but you sack him after 5 games. I mean, that is true as well. Mm-hmm. The part of the reason, yeah, I mean, we'll get into it, but I'm interested to see what people think. It can't get worse. Yes, it can. Yes, it absolutely can. Oh, yes, it absolutely can. You're saying Bayern sacking Ten Hag was wrong. Yeah, no, because I don't like Ten Hag. If he doesn't use the younger players, I think there's two different things that are completely under consideration here, like two different ways of thinking in there, and I think that people have people are going to see them differently, and it's understandable, no doubt about that. Which is that no, the stuff on Ashworth, anyone defending Ashworth, once again, you have no idea what you're talking about. You are completely wrong. This is where I get completely mixed, where people really, really get it wrong. And I say it's so sort of pointless, these discussions among the fan base. Because people will always rewrite history without knowledge and claim things that are completely not true. You say sunk cost fallacy, and then you say we shouldn't have sacked Ashworth. People will say this and they say we shouldn't have sacked Ashworth. No, Ashworth was literally doing the exact same thing as what you're talking about right now. At all. that is the stupid, the Ashworth thing is the stupidest thing imaginable. That is the dumbest thing imaginable. Dan Ashworth had no idea what he was doing when he was here. He had no suggestion. They would have actually changed managers in the summer last season like they should have if Ashworth wasn't there in the first place. That's as simple as it was. He didn't do anything, okay? There was nothing that he was doing. He's done nothing on this front. And he had nothing.
King get Glasner or Simeon or Iraola.
Get Glasner or Simeon. Those are all completely different managers with completely different philosophies and completely different ideas. So, like, what do you think about that aspect? You know. They're completely different managers with completely different philosophies and completely different systems. So I don't see how that makes sense. Like, yeah, if you want to change, that's all good. But, you know. And Dan Ashworth did not want Eddie Howe. That's what I'm saying. You don't know what you're talking about. Dan Ashworth and Eddie Howe could not even slightly get along. Owners and players needs looking at more than the managers. When the going gets tough, the manager's always the problem. Ineos spun the reason into a positive as to why Ashworth got sacked. Yeah, well, he should have, though. That's the thing. Like, sometimes it's just the right thing to do. Sometimes it's just the right thing to do. I'm just looking at this poll, and then I want to talk about a few things in terms of the reality of where we're at. Give me just a sec. Just looking at. Yeah. All right. Fair enough. Okay. So that's the poll. Let's take a look at it, and then I'll talk about some news here and information. So this is where people are at. 63% say sack now. 21% say give him the season. 16% say give it a bit longer. And all of that. Yeah. Yep. All right. Cool. So that's where people are at today. That is where people are at today. Fair enough. Okay. Well, the reality is this, right? I'm waiting for some more messages back in terms of I'm waiting for some more messages back from people who know. I mean, obviously, when Ineos kind of first came in, I talked a lot early on about the whole Ten Hag situation and where they were at, and where they were at that point in time. And that was months and months and months and months and months and months and months ahead of what was in the media, months and months and months ahead of what was in the, what was kind of brief from the club and things like that. That being said, I told you during the international break that, the window, that the view during that international break is that they had seen what they viewed as progress over some things and on a few fronts. And that game, like against City, wasn't going to change anything, that they hadn't started looking at managers, that they hadn't started doing any of those kinds of things. And obviously the news and the lines today, I can tell you some of them are completely false. The spun stories about contacting, Glasner and Iraola and Southgate, bullshit. They're just not true. They're just people adding up things that are there. There's people at the club who, in different positions and things like that, who like certain managers and who view certain managers one way or another. There's people who say, oh yeah, well, Iraola is doing a good job and all of that. But there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing by way of contact, action, or moves as of today that on any of those managers. And those people writing those stories are just making it up. They're actually making it up. I promise you that. They're drawing links. Like the Southgate one is the most boring one imaginable to me right now, because again, there are people who do like Gareth Southgate around Ineos, and there's people who have connections to Gareth Southgate and such around Ineos. But he was written off as an option very, very early on in the process a while ago, and has continued to not be an option, all there. There's managers that people like, there's managers that people don't like, but people are just making a lot of stuff up like that. A lot of times it's for clicks. A lot of times it's because it's easy to throw out a name that people really don't like and claim that it's going to be the case. There's a lot of reasons for them to do that. But the fact of the matter is, yeah, for the most part, it's just people saying stuff. It's just people saying stuff. That's the reality there. Okay. I'm waiting for an update in terms of what I am, can share in terms of the view from higher up on things. Obviously, what I told you before is that Sir Jim is probably less patient than basically everybody else at this point in time. And he's certainly does not feel like, that things can just continue go on losing and losing and losing, and that we can spend another season 15th and all of that. That's just the reality of it. Okay. That's what they're doing. That's where they're at. So as of right this moment, they've not been talking to other managers. They've not been lining up other managers. There's very, 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 very little to nothing in links and things like that about how that they want this manager, they want that manager at this point in time. There's people that they like. There's people that they that obviously you're going to have individuals who look at them and admire them. They're going to have people in scouting, you're going to have people in different management positions that like certain things. But there's a big difference between that and actually doing anything on that. And yeah, until I hear differently, it remains what it's been for weeks, which is that there's no intention to make a change anytime soon. So yeah, there's that aspect of it. And one of the things that I've said before, and what I'm not going to do, and why I find it's boring, is that I'm not going to sit here when we know a manager is unlikely to leave and sit there talking about managers all fucking day, because it becomes boring, but it also becomes very, very, very toxic in general. And for yourself, I'm not talking about from a community standpoint. I'm talking about for yourself. I said this, like, I really, I don't ever want to be in the situation where I was with the Ten Hag thing, where like 6 months before the end of the season, I knew he was gone. I knew it was crap. I knew it was going to be terrible. And I knew that all of this was happening, and you just have to sit there every game. Right now, you've had people, it's just not healthy. I look at so many people watching United, and they're just miserable 24/7. I'm not happy or anything, but you have so many people who are like vindictively celebrate when we lose. Literally, you look at it all over Twitter, and it's like practically purely celebratory. And there's a difference. There's a difference between talking about where we are at and all of that. But there's people who've wanted it out since day one, that will push and will drive and will influence that feeling, and that's fine. And people are entitled to their opinions, but this isn't a good way to be for the fan base. And I can't sit here and make videos daily and talk about what's going on and all of that, and go and be sitting there like basically hoping we lose every game so that we're going to sack the next manager. This has been going on for years, and it's been getting shorter and shorter, and it happens mid-game, and it's disgusting to me. Mid-game. And it's nasty. It is nasty. And like I said beforehand, when I talked about the aspects of positivity and things like that, I don't care if it turns out wrong. I don't care if my support or my feeling of not wanting to be sitting here when I know the manager's in leaving, calling for the manager to leave, talking about how terrible they are, talking about how much I hate them, this kind of stuff, celebrating their losses, posting memes and trashing people and stuff like that. I'm not going to be taking part in that, because I'd much rather be wrong, and at least in the moment be supportive because I can't change it, then do that. And I don't care, when I see, after every time we lose, 4 or 5, 6 of the same accounts. There's people who don't like them, and that's all good, and they can share their opinions. And I think that a lot of them are well reasoned and well managed about it. Like, I give you an example of differences, right? There's a guy, you guys know Ronaldo from Paddock. I like Ronaldo a lot. I mean, I've spoken with him a number of times. I really like him, and we are at probably completely opposite ends on Ruben Amorim and the whole situation around him and things like that. He doesn't think he's going to work at all, thinks he's terrible. Fair enough. There is absolutely zero vindictive celebrating from him when we lose. Absolutely none. And he doesn't sit there and then go, calling me out and shit like that when we lose because I support Amorim or something like that. There's a difference. There's a difference between having a different opinion and the way that the people that act around it. And I'm happy, and it's a part of the fan base I'm just never gonna be behind. I'm going to, and I don't want to be in that situation. Like I said, I'd much rather sit here and be like, all right, I want to talk constructively about what I think is wrong, because there's certainly a lot wrong. I'm not talking about turning a blind eye to everything. I'm talking about at least constructively discussing from my perspective what is wrong and what I think is wrong, because it is wrong. When we're not winning games, and nobody's stupid. We're not winning games. I'm not blind. I felt like a lot of times under Ten Hag, it was very weird, because there was a lot of times when we couldn't even have a discussion because it would just be 2 trophies. You know what I mean? It would just be 2 trophies or something. Like, we won this, and it was like, all right, well, hold on. I'm just trying to discuss what goes on. And I'm trying to have the same discussions about Ruben Amorim without necessarily being, in and out. No, I don't make up my opinions. I think them and I believe them based on what I see, and that's it. I hate it, man. I hate every time we lose that people are, like, the fan base starts to eat each other. You know what I mean? It eats each other, and it sucks, man. It's just a part of it that I really, really dislike. I really, really dislike. No, I absolutely disagree, Hamza, and I'm 100% disagree. You can absolutely, I'm 100% not root for a loss, because you don't understand what happens when we lose. People think it's irrelevant to the players that we're losing. People think it's irrelevant to our current performance that we've had so many players who've been around so much failure. It's not irrelevant to our performance. It's not irrelevant at all. In fact, it is ultimately extremely relevant. It may even be completely relevant to Ruben Amorim that he came in last season, mid-season, experienced so much loss. It may even be the reason he fails. They may have got it completely wrong in bringing him in early, and that's one of my concerns about bringing another manager in mid-season, that if they come in and then they're carrying the weight of the loss of coming in mid-season and failing massively during that season and losing all those games, that it's hard for them to pull back out from that. Those losses and things weigh really, 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 really heavy. Those things weigh really, 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 really heavy. It is my biggest concern with Amorim, is that despite it being this season that he's being judged on and giving the idea of a clean evaluation off of this season, that he is so burnt from the losses last year and what happened last year that he may not recover from it, because those losses kill you, man. I've said this many, many times. It's like this. It's this trauma, and you carry the weight of it, and you carry the pain of it, and you carry all of that forward. It doesn't make it better. Going through a huge losing period doesn't necessarily make it better. I'll give you some examples when it comes down to choosing. The fact that he started the season with Bruno and Casemiro in the midfield, for me, says you didn't let go of last season at all. He changed to that at the end of last year because of some reasons that for me still don't make sense. And he's made decisions that start this year that tell me you could say, well, he learned from last season and there's things you have to do from last season and all of that. That's not one of them. That was not one of them. That was not one of the lessons to learn. That was like a pain reaction. That was like a damage limitation decision that he made that he has not come away from yet. And it's really, really worrying in that respect. That's one of those signs, I think, that are really, really worrying. But that's sort of my thing on it, and that's kind of where I worry, because I feel that we've lost so many games that he's scared. Weren't we supposed to play the younger guys? Yes. And that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about when I say, shoot, I don't know. And so when people talk about bringing another manager mid-season, I look at it and I go, I'm not sure that's going to work. I'm not sure that's going to be what you think it is. I'm not sure that's going to produce what you want it to produce at all. Because these are the pain points. These are the things that are like, there's things that show me that the trauma of all those losses last season are leading to an even further dwindling spiral into this season. And that is a worry, and that can easily be repeated. But no, look, I all I'm saying is I'm not going to put myself in the boat of sitting there, calling names and this and that and the other. And I'll talk about the players in a much more reasonable sense today too than in the overreaction to yesterday. Because my point on guys like Bruno, my point on guys like Bruno is it sounds a lot more harsh in what I'm saying than the actual point of what I'm saying. As well, it sounds a lot worse than what I'm actually talking about. And that's where I'm going to be at. But regardless, when I know that the manager is very likely to stay at least a while longer, then what I look at is to say, all right, changing managers mid-season won't mean we win second balls, magically start scoring, or have a defensive line. Yeah. I don't know why it's not. Okay, yeah. I don't know why I didn't read that out, but let's say it's the full season because they see. I'm gonna it's hard for me to get on board with what you just typed because they don't want to accept they made a mistake. That isn't the reason. I know people do this, and that's the part where it gets very frustrating. Everything in football in these discussions turns into ad hominem. Everything turns into ad hominem. You talk about you talk about the way you see the game, you're on the payroll. You talk about don't do this, don't want to admit you're wrong. No, it's not everything does not constantly need to be turned into ad hominem. Okay, listen to me for a second, okay? Guys who build giant $76 billion businesses aren't sitting there, didn't get there by not being able to admit and rectify mistakes. I promise you, if you've ever worked in business, you will know people that cannot, under any circumstances, change because they cannot admit they made mistakes, do not succeed. They do not succeed. Okay. Omar Barada was very successful at City. Wilcox was very successful as an academy director at City, in different roles and things like that. People will always get into this ad hominem, and it is fundamentally wrong for the discussion. When people disagree, instead of being able to have a reasonable argument or a reasonable view of why someone sees things a different way, don't go into that. Don't get into that. It's so pointless. I promise you, they will prioritize winning trophies, not admitting they made a mistake. They admitted they made a mistake with Ten Hag. They let him go within 2 months. They admitted they made a mistake with other people. They let him go. They've done it time and time again. They've admitted they've made mistakes and made changes. The fact is they don't actually just see it the way that you do. Now, maybe they're right. Maybe they're wrong. Okay? Maybe they're right. Maybe they're wrong. But they don't have the same view on all of this, just because they're looking at things differently than you, doesn't mean it's on the basis of not making mistake. Look, if we finish 15th, will it be hard to recruit those players? Yes. So on that basis, I completely agree with your point. The worse that it gets, the harder, we can't have another season like that, and it'll make the difficulty in recruitment will be really, really tough there. but it doesn't have to be that. And like I say, I'm not interested in debating those aspects of discussion. Like I say, when I sit here and I talk about my views on things, which differ from people's, it's the same thing. People make those same points. It turns into a random ad hominem. Well, you disagree with me, therefore it must be some reason that can't have any
retains support
objectivity.
for the season from the board, etc. When does the club start to prepare for championship football, in your opinion?
Probably when we're in the relegation zone. Probably around March. No, look, the fact of the matter is, see, like, we're just going to mute these things because these are just stupid. There you go. No, the fact of the matter is that when you, right now, he has the support. Right now, they don't want to make a change. Right now, it's early on in the season and they want to see where things go. Right now, there are things that they see that they do like and things that they are 100% concerned about. I can tell you that from conversations I've had yesterday after the game with people, these things don't necessarily translate to actions. That's kind of the point here, okay? And why I don't get forward on talking about the managers and things until I know that there's actual action on that front, is because there are concerns. And the concerns that are shared are very, very similar to mine.
I see the media are now pushing for the CEO and Doff to go too. I'm sure they would love it if we keep changing the manager and the structure every year.
100%. 100%. Yeah. And it's going to keep. And look, here's the thing, right? They've backed the manager heavily and all of that, no doubt. I just look at it and go, there are things I can tell you that they have concerns about. Serious concerns with what is going on. And they are things that they're hopeful that can be changed at the same time, and that are not necessarily permanent problems, things that they believe can be improved. But there are people who share concerns with mine. Sometimes my opinions that I have come from talking with people who I think have more information, more knowledge, more view behind the scenes than myself. And so I say, yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. And sometimes I say things and I'm surprised to see them repeated by people from within. I don't know how that happens, but the view that a lot of them have is the same as mine on certain points. And I want to point out a couple of interesting things. Look, I've made my point on this clear, which is that, one, they're not right today talking to managers and making a change. If things were to continue to get worse, would Sir Jim Ratcliffe go and say, yeah, this is getting untenable? Absolutely. All right. Like, genuinely, I don't think that there's any 100% he's getting the whole season. Okay. I don't think that, but, Ratcliffe wants to, certainly, as I've said before, he is fairly impatient in comparison to others. If things were to keep going, he would definitely, he can definitely change his mind. That's something he does, and he's very willing to do is change his mind. That being said, in the short term, his view has been to want to see if there are things he can help solve and change and do all of that, to see if there's something else, that can go on. So, so yeah, that's where we're at. And so, like I said, I don't want to sit and discuss who's the next manager or these kinds of things, because until that's actually a purposeful discussion, and it's not as of yet. Now, again, I am waiting for a message, so I want to see if I'm waiting for a message. Maybe it'll come in soon. Maybe it'll come by the end of the video. I don't know. Whether it's today or tomorrow, I'll talk about it if my understanding on things updates at all. But until that point in time, I don't think there's a point in discussing it myself. What I do want to talk about is constructively look at what I do genuinely think is going wrong and why. And why I think that, and why I see that. You know what I mean? And and why I see things that way, and see if we can find any sort of common ground and understanding. Because should we change managers, I think this is 1,000,000% true as well for the next manager. You know what I mean? I think it's 1,000,000,000% true for the next manager. And I wanted to share something interesting. Now, first and foremost, yesterday's game kind of was, I see what's really funny is like my evaluations of where United are at, I think is the same as yesterday's game. Pretty much played out pretty well with my expectations of what would happen. We concede big chances. All week when I talked about the tactics and I talked about stats and things like that, what was the conclusion? That we will make enough chances to score goals. And despite it being a really, really bad performance, we did. We made enough chances to score goals. We missed a penalty, which was not like some random penalty. It was a denial of a goal-scoring opportunity, similar to the Chelsea one. Should have been a red, doesn't matter. We made that penalty. It was a great goal-scoring opportunity. We made enough chances to score 2 goals in that game, and we should have. But we gave up huge chances once again defensively. Big chances defensively. We were awful. And so we actually continue to be at this point performance-wise where it was a bad performance. Despite that, we'll create a few good chances to score goals, but we will also concede way too many big chances. Our defending is way worse than our attacking. Way worse than our attacking. It's way worse. We give up big chances. In the first half of that game, they had 4 shots and 4 big chances and 2 goals. Brentford. 4 shots, 4 big chances, and 2 goals. Crazy. The way that we defend was so bad. So bad. But you also look at it and say, yeah, we were literally a missed pen away from drawing, despite the horrendousness of that performance. And again, it's not excusing the performance, because for me, yesterday was the worst game that we played. I mean, what chance did we create? I mean, Šeško scored a goal and we had a penalty. You don't need hundreds always to score. I mean, we watched Liverpool, who finally lost, by the way, which was great. Amazing job at Crystal Palace. We watched Liverpool score on like 2 chances, and they'll just score them. You know, sometimes, you know, it's like when we play teams and we concede, they'll make like 1 chance and we'll score and we'll say we're bad. But when we show up and play, if we make a couple very good chances, it's like, well, we didn't make any, but we say opponents did. It doesn't matter. We made enough chances to score 2 goals. We played very poorly. We played terribly defensively and set up really bad defensively. We had 2 chances all game, and one of them was a keeper error. What do you call Brentford's chance? I mean, we give teams errors every game. Do you see those second goals? Like, hold on a second. I want to. Did you see the second goal? All right, look at this moment, okay? Like when I get it, I hear you, but like. We always do that thing. We make so many errors. It's unbelievable, and it's painful, and it's incredible how bad the error's in. I don't know if you guys can see this, but if you haven't seen this, I recommend watching it, okay? I recommend watching it, okay? If you haven't seen this. This is Diogo Dalot, okay? This is Diogo Dalot, okay? I don't know if you've watched this. This is Diogo Dalot. So like, here's the thing, okay? This isn't excusing the performance, all right? I want to make that clear, okay? It's not excusing the performance. But like when people go like, oh, like our goal we scored, the chances we create was an error by the opposition. Have you watched us play? Hold on, it gets worse. Hold on. He's left. He's left the building. He's gone. And then the ball flicks off of... I'm trying not to play too much, just in case. The ball flicks off, goes to Shada unmarked, and then wait, it gets worse. And he goes in the box unmarked. I don't know if there's more. There's actually more in that video, but then you watch in the middle, he doesn't even mark the guy he runs off for. But this is like, you could put this in a comedy sketch and it would fit. Look at this. Where's he going? Where's he going? Where? Where is he going? What happened? Oh my God! It absolutely killed me. Like, it's one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Where'd he go? Where did he go? Yeah, you could absolutely put Benny Hill music on this and it would just be like too funny. It would absolutely just be too funny. This is a Portuguese international who has been at the club for 7 years. 7 years he's been at this club. Like, and it gets worse if you actually watch the full clip, because he runs to the middle to, maybe he thinks he's going to mark the goal scorer. I don't know. Maybe that's what he thinks he's going to do. And then he doesn't anyway. It's even worse than that. Okay. And now realize that actually what has been 8 years for Dalot now. And now realize, in addition, that is our fullback. When we're saying, oh, wait, we wish we didn't have Ahmad available to play an attacking wingback on the outside. Dalot is supposed to be, at least we'd be better defensively. At least we'd be better defensively. Like, that has nothing to do with wingback. Okay? Man ran off to... He heard the next Andrew Tate podcast had dropped, apparently, and was just rushing off to listen to it real quick mid-game. I don't know. I don't know what the reason is. I don't know. I have absolutely no idea what the reason is. All right. And so when we do this thing of like, well, the opposition made mistakes. Well, no fucking shit, man. So do we, week in and week out. This is the part I find interesting. This is the part I find interesting, and I actually want to explain my thinking here so you can at least understand where I'm at. Right? Our system under Ruben Amorim doesn't change game to game. And what people don't get in terms of my view, and you're taking this in terms of like at fault and critiques and all of these kinds of things and such, is like you have tactics, and then let's put it in green. You have, I don't know, personnel choices. And the manager is ultimately responsible for both of these, right? Personnel. I think I spelled that wrong. Does it have another L? This is an American education moment for me. I don't know. Doesn't matter. Tactics and personnel. Okay. Ruben Amorim's tactics are not changing game to game at all. We kind of know that. The tactics aren't changing game to game. He picks the personnel. So what I see happening is we get a good performance against Arsenal. I was right the first time. All right, cool. We had a good performance against Arsenal. We didn't win. We go into Fulham. We perform for like 20 minutes. Maybe 30, 40 minutes, and then we drop off. Good performance against Burnley. We perform for about 20 minutes, 25 minutes against City. Good performance against Chelsea. I get it. We got a red card. And then we perform for like 0 minutes against Brentford. Okay. This is the way that this is going. The second L is for all the L's we take. Yeah, there you go. So we get a good performance. We get about like maybe 40 minutes, 20 minutes, 0 minutes of good performances in every other game. Okay. And the overall is, to me, going down, right? Because it's actually getting worse. Every other game, to me, is getting worse. I found a lot of similarities between the City game and the Fulham game. I find a lot of similarities between the Brentford game, the City game, and the Fulham game. It's getting worse. And my biggest complaint is that, again, the tactics are saying the same. And what's often happening is you get the player performances. We have a lot of on their day players. That's just the truth. We have a lot of guys who have on-off days. We have a lot of guys who play okay one day, okay the next. I think Luke Shaw is the biggest measure of this. Is it also playing away from home? I mean, that's an interesting point because these are technically all home games. You're right. This was home. This was home. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that matters. It still implies the same thing. Okay. We have a lot of on their day players. Luke Shaw, for example, he played well against Arsenal. He played absolutely shit against Fulham. He played well against Burnley. He was very aggressive. He played absolutely shit against City. He played well against what do you call it? What was the game after? Against Chelsea. No, he actually played kind of poorly against Chelsea, which he was okay. He was okay. And then he played absolutely diabolically yesterday. All right, so I'll use Shaw as an example. But here is the problem. There are ups and downs. You can't just reward these ups and ignore the downs. Because what you're doing and why it's getting worse is because you need to have some kind of standard here, right? Let me reset this. You need to have some kind of standard. So if your performances are like this, that's terrible. If your performances are up and down, and you're trying to raise the standard, you have to be able to cut the downs to raise the average, right? You have to remove the downs. You have to get it more like this at the top. You have to. You have to. There's no penalty being enforced for all of these dips. Every time United are poor, nothing changes. Nothing happens. There's no consequences. There's no accountability. The only way you can raise the standard is to provide accountability for when they play poorly, you know? There's no standard for that. You have to, like, cut the bottom. You have to say, this is unacceptable. This is unacceptable. This is unacceptable. This is unacceptable. If you're going to raise the standard, otherwise you're always going to fall into the floor, right? You're going to end up in the flooring. If there are no consequences for failure, then failure becomes acceptable. You're telling people this is okay every time that happens. And that is my chief complaint with everything that has gone on, and what I've explained for a long time. Last year, I've maintained this for a very long time, because this was my big criticism actually last year. When we went into the final stretch of the season, I said then, I made a video before the Europa League final, I've always had this stance with Amorim that my biggest concern was his player selection was not helping us. And it's not just about picking the right players. It's about accountability and standards. I'll give you, here's the thing. Like, if, let's say I talk about Bruno being poor. You can take it a couple of different ways. Bruno played like shit. At no other club, would a player who plays like shit week in and week out not face some sort of accountability or consequence, i.e. benching, sub them off, make changes, or something? Why is, if I've said, if you don't make that change, what you're telling someone is that it is okay to play poorly, that what they're doing is okay. And that is what Ruben is getting wrong massively. And that is why it's getting as bad as it's getting. Because you continue to accept poor performances. And it's why I find some of the arguments very, very hypocritical, all right? Because people will say, we need to change the manager, we're losing a lot of games, the standards are low. Okay. Except there's a big problem with that. That we're accepting the standards of losing. There's a big problem with that. What about the 11 players who are playing? The same does apply to them, right? And so that's why I've said, look, there are guys who are performing poorly week in and week out. They need consequences, okay? They need consequences as well. At the same time, accountability. It has to go both ways. So if you can sit there and say, look, yes, I want the manager to change. The standards are low. He needs to be accountable for losing. I'm going to agree with you. If you're not going to be able to have the discussion as well, that the exact same point applies to the players that play poorly week in and week out, then we're not on the same page, because then nothing is going to change. Okay? And so my biggest problem with Ruben Amorim at this point in time, no, it's not. It's not, HB. That's the thing. You say, hey, this player was a bad game. People go, oh, he's our best player. This and that. Okay, so what? He had a bad game, you know? And this is one of the reasons that we have failed for such a long time, that people don't recognize. And there's times that I didn't get it either. There was times I didn't see it either. There was times when I didn't align with this. But when you're trying to set standards on things and you've got all these guys down here, every time you take this guy and say, all right, we're losing, you're gone. These guys just survive. Look at them. It's not a new bloody team. That's the issue. It isn't. It actually isn't. It's not a new team. I mean, people keep saying that, but look at the players. I'm talking about specifics that he does not provide accountability for. That's the irony of it. The new players, the newer players, the younger players are all facing regular accountability. Shaw plays every game. No accountability for him. Bruno plays every game and doesn't get subs. No accountability for him. There's none. Šeško hasn't even gotten to get going. He's gotten like 1 or 2 starts. Bayindir has played every single game in the Premier League. Every single game. And there's no accountability. Why? Why doesn't he put somebody else on? That is the discussion at hand. That is the part of it that is a complete failure. It isn't a new team. He has 4 new starters. That's it. You understand that? 4. A lot of them are the same, and the ones who haven't been here that long don't tend to be the ones who are failing. The ones who are failing are the ones who have been here longer, and they're the ones that there are no accountability for. There's none. And that is absolutely baffling. So when you're asking for accountability for the manager, agreed. And for me, it's because he's not holding players accountable. But that is worrying. That is the scariest part of it. Okay? That is the scariest part of it. Is that there is if we do change managers now, is the next person going to do the same thing? That terrifies me. It's gone on for a long time. It can be almost done over the course of another year because there's a lot of turnover. And the thing where people will go, yeah, but it hasn't. I said this at the start of last year, and it's just about position and things. It's not. Dude, Bruno through Christmas last year was absolutely terrible. And there was no accountability for him from Ten Hag either. And it was, again, one of my big complaints under Ten Hag. He had his favorites. He had players he punished and players that there was no accountability for. And it cost him the job. And this is a huge, huge critique I have of Ruben Amorim because it will. He will fail if he doesn't correct this. And he will be sacked. And he will lose his job. And I cannot back it because...
bold decisions are needed. Enough of playing Law and Shaw. He got schooled yesterday. Unfortunately, we are past. Why does he not do this? He won't.
I don't disagree with you. I'm very fair in the criticisms that I have. My biggest criticisms of Ten Hag were his communication, and he had the squad in a situation where some players played no matter what, and some had no idea what they had to do in order to succeed. I have the exact same opinion about Ruben Amorim today. That he is doing the same thing and making the exact same mistakes and failing at it. That bothers me a lot. That bothers me an awful, awful lot. It does. It bothers me tremendously because I look at Kobbie Mainoo and I go, I agree. There are things he needs to improve. I don't think Kobbie Mainoo knows what he has to do to play because Bruno can be a 1 out of 10 and will play and will not be subbed. And here's the worst part about that. You're not making Bruno better by not subbing him. You're not making Bruno better by not rotating him. You're not improving him. That's the point I'm making on this. It sounds harsh. Bruno's terrible, all this. No, he's not. Point is, if there's no consequences for having a bad game, if you don't get subbed for having a bad game, if you don't get subbed when you're playing like crap, if you don't get rotated when you're struggling, that doesn't do you any favors either. That doesn't help you. That doesn't make anything better for you. That's not good management. Everybody has to be dropped. Everybody has to be changed. Everybody has to be able to be subbed. If you want them to improve and to get better, that has to happen. So at no other club would that not, right? At no other club would that not happen. You're saying it's okay. Bruno doesn't even half run anymore and he doesn't get benched for it. He's not even putting the same kind of effort in that he has. And I'm saying bench him and then play him the next week and maybe he'll get back into some form. You know, he actually turned around his season last year after getting suspended and not being on the pitch and getting penalized for being a dickhead, which he was being at that time. And his performance has turned around. He got the red card against Newcastle, sat there, watched us struggle there, watched us struggle the next game, had some consequences for playing poorly by not being able to be on the pitch, and actually started to perform again after that. You can do that right now. Bruno's struggling. Bruno's making mistakes. Bruno looks unfocused. He's missed 2 penalties in the Premier League already. That's cost us 4 points. Just take him off for a game. Sub him. Take him off for 2 games. Take him off for 3. It doesn't matter. Sub him. Change it. Take the pressure off. Get him to view things from a different perspective and get him back out there because he's talented. Because he is a good player. You know, that's how you play players in. You don't just keep playing them constantly when they're shit, 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 and not doing anything. You know? That's the problem. That's what I'm talking about. That's the kind of shit that irritates me. And that's what I see Ruben Amorim is getting completely wrong. That isn't helping them play better. You know, there's players who I think if you know, again, because it's being done for Lenny Yoro. When he came in last year, Lenny Yoro, he protected him. He struggled a bit. He took him off of the pitch. He didn't play a bunch of games, and he started to get him back in. And he actually got really, really good. And through the year, he improved because he was taking him out, subbing him, rotating him, and he got good. He did the same with Ahmad, and it got better. He did the same with quite a few players, and they got better. There were players he persisted with, no matter what, that were playing poorly, and they got worse and worse and worse. And this is a failing. This is a failing. And this is to me really the crux of the entire issue. When I talk about players, when I talk about this guy's shit, this guy's struggling, this guy's poor, this guy's this guy's that, what I'm saying at that moment in time is, like I said last week, in terms of being positive, I think everybody here wants to be here. I think everybody here in terms of players wants to play. I think everybody here wants to be successful. I think they want to. I'm not sure they're all good enough to, but I think they want to. But you've got some guys who've been off and on for years, and they're not facing consequences. You know, Aiden Heaven could be playing in place of Luke Shaw. The only players that are facing accountability, are young players. Lenny Yoro, Kabi Manu, and to a degree, once again, I've said it a million times, and I'm going to continue to say it, Manu Ugarte is always punished for Bruno being poor in that midfield. It happens every week. It happened against City. It happened again yesterday. I'm not saying he was amazing. He was far from the problem in that midfield yesterday. But he will be taken off. Now, I get it. We wanted more attackers on the pitch and things like that. But if you'd taken Bruno off when he was struggling and not doing anything helpful yesterday, you probably win that game or at least draw it because someone else would have been on pens and likely would have scored it, you know? But it's this terrible, terrible, poor management of accountability. And it includes Bruno. And it's like people can accept that Dalo's bad. People can accept it about Luke Shaw. Bruno is a part of that, where he needs to be held accountable for playing poorly. One of the things people are maybe missing a little bit here is that Bruno is declining, and this is what a decline looks like. And the worst thing we can do for him is to play him every single week and keep making him the main guy every single week. Bruno is declining. If you step back and look at how the seasons have gone, this is what a decline looks like, by the way. It doesn't mean he's not amazing. Doesn't mean hasn't been incredible over the course of his year. Doesn't mean that Bruno wasn't an amazing, incredible player for United. Doesn't take away from the years of things that he did well. Doesn't do any of that. He is declining. The inconsistency, the slow starts to a season where you spend a few months getting up to speed and being poor, has been going on for a few years now. This is what a decline looks like. A lot of the stuff he does that used to come off isn't coming off at the same level anymore. And so instead of forcing him into to playing through, instead of forcing him through to be the guy all the time, unsubbable, undroppable, and all of that, it's becoming worse and worse. It's being forced into become worse and worse, and it's actually accelerating that decline. I think if you take Bruno off and all of that, then and you sub him and you rotate him, he has a better chance of recovering, of playing better in the moments when he's on, the minutes when he's on, and when he's on, than he does what we're doing right now. Because I think what we're doing right now just isn't going to work. And I don't care if that means he can run for 90 minutes. I don't care if it means I don't care about that stuff. The performances, the intensity of his actions, the preciseness of things, isn't there. A lot of people made the point, I disagreed, but you were probably right, that we shouldn't sign Ollie Watkins because he's 29 years old and he might be declining soon. Bruno's old, man. It was the same thing we saw with Casemiro. He's declined. He was declining when he arrived. Well, he was the same age as Bruno is right now. He is declining. We can do a lot better to protect him, because just because a player is declining doesn't mean they can't don't have incredible talents and incredible abilities. But it's about managing them properly during that decline, during that period when maybe they're not the same player they were when they were 25 years old, because they're not. And that's what happens. So those are the chief complaints that I have. We can't, the whole accountability discussion and the standards and things like that for Amorim are totally true. Totally true. It's worrying. If Beckham and Gig can transition, well, Bruno said himself by quotes that he wanted to transition into a deeper role, but so I'm not putting it on the manager that I'm just not. He doesn't have the pace and the athleticism to play in the front three anymore. I hope people do realize that. So that part of the discussion is silly. He doesn't have the pace and the athleticism to play in a front three. Got it? He doesn't. All right. So yes. So then the only solution is go back to a 4-2-3-1 and say he has to play in the 10. All right. So we'll build the team around the guy who will be gone maybe next year, maybe the following. That's not the right answer either. Okay. That's not the right answer either. The right answer is to simply have accountability, take the pressure off, and make changes, but he doesn't have the athleticism to play in the front three. If he can't play deep, then I don't know what the answer is there. But regardless, I think it would help him to sub off sometimes, to change sometimes, to do all of that, or anything. And that would help him actually play better. That would help him actually play better. For sure. But we're at that same point. We're at that same point where it needs to be understandable. It needs to be understandable what you have to do to play. And right now, it isn't for a lot of young players. If we were having inconsistencies, but playing Aiden Heaven, Yoro, Kabi Mainu, had some young wingbacks in there, Laman's in there. If we were having inconsistencies and those guys were playing, you'd have a much longer lead. We could say, all right, we understand. Those guys are growing as players. Those guys are improving. Those guys are going to take time to get good. But when you are picking these guys, Luke Shaw, Dallo, Bayindir, Bruno, and not subbing them, not changing them, none of that, and you're still losing and you're still inconsistent, then all the excuses, all of the reasons go out the window. They're gone at that point. And that's the biggest problem that we're running into. And it's frustrating. It really is. And so when I'm looking at this and saying, if we're not changing the manager, and right now we're not changing the manager, from my perspective, in an attempt to be constructive with the criticism of what I have, I said before the Chelsea game even that I hoped Sir Jim being there, putting a little pressure and talking would force not necessarily changes to the system, but changes to the selection. Because if Ruben Amorim is playing in his first season and he's being judged based on his first season, then stop fucking choosing players that aren't for the future. Because that is antipathetic to the entire concept of what is being built. It is completely at odds with it's your first season and we're building something for the long term. It is completely at odds with that. If it is your first season, if you're being evaluated as it being your first season, if you're being judged based on it being your first season, pick the young players and play them. Don't get stuck on guys who have been here for ages. Somebody brought something up yesterday. That does worry me. And I wonder about this, and it scares me a little bit. And it is really, really worrisome. Ruben Amorim is young. He's a young coach. I'm really concerned that, and they said, what if the age gap between him and some of these senior players is so small that he doesn't feel the ability to discipline them the same way or is too close to them? And that would be a gigantic error and a huge problem. Because if he doesn't feel like the boss of them, that would explain a lot. And that would be a disaster. Because it's sort of unexplainable why he feels the need to discipline the young players and not the older players. Why he feels he can hold the young players accountable, but doesn't apply the same standard to the older players. That is a serious concern. Is it an age issue? Does he feel like, I've been in businesses where I, have to work with people where they're a lot older, or have clients and people who are a lot older, and you can worry about that and it can mess you up. You have to be able to deal with it anyway. I'm not saying that applies to every young manager, by the way. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that applies to every young manager. I'm saying, is that what he's doing? I don't know. But it's worrying because I'm sitting here trying to figure out why he refuses to hold the older players accountable. And if that is not happening, that is where my hope is that somebody else has to step in. I don't think it's the age thing. He just feels pressure to win and thinks the older players can do it. Probably. And that's the most likely thing, Bliff. And that's again, the biggest concern that I have as well is that I think he believes that these experienced older players are going to figure it out and carry him, and that they're old enough, they're experienced enough to get it right. And I think what he's missing in that is they're not. These are not, unfortunately, guys, I'm sorry to say, our older experienced players, bar Casemiro, whose legs are actually gone. It's obvious they are. They do not have the pedigree. You can say, wow, look at the stats they've put up at United. But what have they actually done in their careers that prove to you that they are winners that will sort it out? Because there is a mentality aspect to that matters. They're not winners. I'm sorry. A lot of these senior players you're relying on are not winners. There's very little evidence that they can be the guys that will carry you. There's almost none. Bruno might be. I don't think he is anymore. And I don't think he has been for a few years. And, you know, and just because they're playing at United doesn't make them United players. They haven't accomplished anything. We have a lot of failures in this team. A lot of guys who have failed in this team, you know? A lot of guys who have not been successful over the course of their careers. United has been a failure for a long, long time. So you remember we were talking about how, you know, the way in terms of we view recruitment and things like that has to change. Instead of it being like you've made it to United and you're at United, so you've made it. You haven't. United is a platform to make it. A lot of these players have had the platform to make it at United, and they haven't. They haven't been successful. They haven't accomplished anything. You know, they've accomplished, in many cases, a lot of them less than players right now at Tottenham. The last time we won Europa League, no fault of his own, but he wasn't there. Luke Shaw was in crutches on the sideline. That was the biggest trophy we've won since Sir Alex. None of these players were there for it. Bruno's lost 2 finals. Maguire's lost 2 finals. They haven't accomplished anything. Cool, we've won an FA Cup and a League Cup. You know who that puts us on par with? The Leicester squad that got relegated and Crystal Palace. They're not guys where you will sit and say, if you are praying that they're going to carry your team, you're screwed because they've never done it. Bruno has maybe carried a poor team up the table. Don't get me wrong, 100%. I strongly believe he is in decline and we're making it worse for him in the way that we're dealing with things. That's the issue. That's the problem. We're not in Palace. Well, I agree. What I'm saying is that they've won as big a trophy. So, like, these guys haven't made it by being here to carry you up. They just haven't, and that hasn't been accepted. And that is, I think there's my concern over the age thing, but I do also believe the more obvious reason is he thinks that certain people, if he just keeps playing them, they'll fix it. They're not gonna fix it, man. And the problem is that we have today is the same problem that I had with Chelsea, where I did say after the game, I said it was a good performance, it was a good game. No, I know, Shatters, I know. I'm just saying from a trophy standpoint. Which is that they can perform for a game. And the problem is they can do it again against Sunderland. They can do it again against Sunderland. They can perform for a game. We already know that. You know, we already know that they can perform for one game. And then they can turn it off again. And then they can turn it on again. And then they can turn it off again. We already know. So when we win with those players, it doesn't prove anything. You know what would really make me feel good? If we won a game with Yoro, Mainu, Lamans, these guys playing, I would feel good. I would feel confidence in the future. A lot more confidence, because the problem we have right now is, like, let's say he's not going. This is my problem with Amorim and with Wilcox and all of them in their evaluation of this, okay? You can play Shaw, Bruno, Casemiro, and you can beat Sunderland at home next week. And I bet you we will. I know people think we won't. I think we will. Because they are good players. And when they play, we can beat teams. And we've been good at home and we've been good every other game. We can. And we probably will beat them. And you know what it'll mean? Nothing. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of time. It's a complete waste of time. Because you can go into the next game and they'll let you down again. They have to fix, something has to change there. Something has to change there. They shouldn't get to play against Sunderland after the performances they put in against Brentford. By India, Shaw, Dallo, Bruno, Casemiro got a red card against Chelsea. He shouldn't just come back into the team after his red card. They shouldn't get to play next week against Sunderland. They just shouldn't. That's my constructive criticism on this. That's what I say needs to change. Yeah, Maguire too. Yeah, he hasn't played that much. That's why I hadn't quite lumped him in that group, because he hasn't actually played that much. But he was poor against Brentford, so he shouldn't play in the next one. I agreed. But I haven't lumped him in the same group because he hasn't been like this undroppable player. Whenever he's not played a lot when he's fit, even. So that's what I'm saying. That's my position. That's my stance on the matter. That's where I'm at on it. Those players should not be offered the chance to play again. Where it really concerned me was when he picked the same 11 that lost in the Europa final to Aston Villa the following week. And I said, and we won. And it's like, oh, see, anyway, no, that is the evidence. You watch that Aston Villa game, you watch that Europa League final, it's the same players. That was all the evidence you need that these guys don't have it. The guys you're picking don't have it. We actually only won that game once Dallo came off and Ahmad moved over to wingback, and we got lucky with the red card on Emmy. And that was a bit of a lucky red card. That was just a complete bozo moment. But that was the huge red flag to me at the end of last season that made me really, really unhappy when I talked about his selection. Because why the fuck did the guys who lost that European final get to play in our final home game against Aston Villa? Why? Why? It can't, it doesn't, it's too, it could be that it's too weak. But we're not winning anyway. I'd rather we don't win with these other guys, because at least we're giving them some chances. You know? That's the part that just baffles me. He said he's not changing his system. He should be able to change his personnel. But that's where I think others have to step in. I do. Because I know that there are concerns over some of the selection choices and management of players. I can tell you that. Okay? Info, not opinion. I know there are concerns over selection and the management of players. More than there are tactically. I can tell you that from people I speak with, that is the case. So I believe someone needs to step in on that front and say, look, this is stupid. Like, this isn't doing you any favors. It's not helping you. And it's costing us. And there has to be consequences for poor performance. There has to be. So, yeah, that's the view. I do know there are concerns with that. And I do know that there are people who agree with that. So, yeah, I know. When we were playing Casemiro into the last game of the season, I was like, what's the point of this, man? Like, wait, what are we doing with that? That one bothers me a lot. That one really, really did. But yeah, so you just have to have accountability. It's not like Bruno can't play It's not where like Shaw can't play. It's not like Dalot can't play, though, you know, you might say they can't and they shouldn't. But what I'm saying is that there has to be on and off. There has to be consequences. There has to be, if they're not playing well, make them accountable. If they're not playing well, get them off the pitch. You know, if they're not playing well, sub them. If they're doing poorly, make changes and then keep making changes, you know, until you have some kind of form, because you haven't hit it yet. You have on again, off again players right now, and we have no evidence of consistency. Once you get consistency, then keep the team. Don't keep the team that is failing and, you know, is, yeah. If Bruno scored those penalties, we'd be 1 point off third place. You're right. But he didn't. And there's no accountability for it. And it was obvious it was going to happen. He had a shit game. He was completely crap again against Brentford, and there was no consequences. And then Cunha and Mbeumo make the penalty happen, and Bruno steps up to miss it. There has to be consequences. There has to be accountability. Man City got rid of Walker because he isn't deemed good enough, and he's still 10 times the player of Luke Shaw. Agreed. But City, you know, started benching, changing, moving Kevin De Bruyne when he started to decline. We just can't see it. And it's like nobody is denying that De Bruyne is one of the best players of all time. Literally, he's one of the best players of the Premier League history. Like, in the top 10, probably. Or at least of the modern era. That doesn't mean he shouldn't have been subbed, rotated, and consequently sold after a certain point. It just doesn't. It happens, man. Like, it's frustrating. You talk about it, you say, well, Bruno played poorly yesterday. He's got 300 goals and assists. Okay. Thank you. It's like, okay. You know, like, he played poorly yesterday. He's been our best player since Fergie. Okay, he played poorly yesterday. He's been our best player since... Okay, like, can we have some relevance to discussions here? Like, I'm talking about right now. Bruno's playing poorly. Okay. It's like it goes in circles. You know, Casemiro won 5 Champions League. He's a much more accomplished player. Should he have no consequences? Should he play forever? Should he start every single game? No. Of course not. Nobody would say that. Ruben Amorim won 3 titles at Sporting, their first in 19 years. Does that absolve him of any criticism for what he does right now? No. Not at all. Imagine if every time you criticized Amorim, someone goes, well, yeah, but he won 3 titles at Sporting. I don't do that. It's like the boring Ten Hag argument. Ten Hag's managing a bad team. Well, he won 2 trophies. Managing a team poorly, won 2 trophies. Managing team poorly, won 2 trophies. It's the same shit. It's such a boring aspect of discussion. So, yeah, it looks like they're chalking the pen off for Arsenal. It's making it a dive instead. So, you know, these are just parts of it. It's like, can we discuss? Yeah, no pen. That's what he says, I think. No penalty. I want to just be able to discuss like what is happening in the here and now with relevance. Players age, players get worse. Right now, Bruno's playing poorly. Right now, Shaw's playing poorly. You know, Shaw's been playing poorly for a long time. You know, right now, these things are happening. And I just like, we got to do something about that in the here and now for the team to get better. So it's like, can we just talk about what just happened? You know? Anyway, that's all. So, yeah, reality right now, United aren't doing anything. Right now, United aren't changing the manager. Right now, nothing's happening on that front. Right now, he has the full backing. Again, I'll update when and if I have information that changes this from a different level. They definitely haven't been talking to managers. They definitely haven't made contact. If you wanted to ask a semi-informed opinion, I would say it would be Javier Iraola. if we were to make a change. If you wanted a semi-informed opinion, but that doesn't mean that they're being lined up. I'm not going to use any of that terminology. I'm just telling you my semi-informed opinion that it would be Xavi or Iraola. And that some of the other names that are being even spoken about aren't even have never been under consideration and wouldn't become under consideration right now. So that would be my semi-informed opinion on something that isn't happening at the moment. Is that that those two would be options. I'd be surprised if like if tomorrow Sir Jim changed his mind and they sacked the manager, I would probably say so Xavi would come in. Again, doesn't mean there's been discussions, doesn't mean that they've done it, doesn't mean that they've that's going to happen, doesn't mean they're in talks for it, doesn't mean Sir Jim's thinking about it. I'm just telling you at the moment what I would say on that point. So, yeah, whatever. But yeah, and so given that, I'm just laying my constructive criticism on the table, which is that what I think needs to change here, because I don't think we want to lose. Should we cut him loose? I don't know. I don't have. Here's how I feel, and this can be a diplomatic answer, but it's how I don't think it's as simple as like a yes or no. Because for me, it's less about who is the manager. I don't care. It's what they do that I care about because of everything that I've just spoken about. A new coach is going to have the same squad. Are they going to fall into the same trap and make the same mistakes? It could be the best manager, and they could do the same things, and I would feel the same way. I've been saying for weeks that to me it's a selection problem. It's a lack of accountability problem. It's not picking the right people. It's not making players accountable for performances. It's not making it understandable what some young players have to do to get on the pitch. It's being punitive to them while others get a free pass. It doesn't mean all those players are bad. It doesn't mean Bruno is bad. It doesn't mean this and that. It means if they're playing poorly, you have to be able to drop them. If they're playing poorly, you have to be able to rotate them. If they're inconsistent, bench them. Don't wait until it's too late. Do something about it. I've lost belief that Amorim will do that. If he does it, I think we'll start winning games, and I'll be happy he stayed. If he doesn't, then it's inevitable. So I don't need to hold that stance, but it's pretty much predicated on that. If he doesn't fix this, if he doesn't really start picking, playing, and selecting on meritocracy purely, then he has to go. So it's more like, to me, if he isn't going to change this, I want him to leave. If he will change it, I'm fine with him staying because I think it will turn things around. That's my position on it. We will find out very soon if he is willing to change those things or has any mind to change those things or not. So that's kind of my stance on it. So just again, repeating it. Just repeating it again, okay? If he is willing to pick purely based on meritocracy, give young players a chance, sub players when they're not performing, rotate players when they're not performing, including all of the older, more experienced veterans, Shaw, Bruno, Dalot, change the keeper, then I'm fine with him staying. If he's not going to change those things, then I want him to leave because then our results are not going to change. Something has to change for the results to change. And I think those things would make a difference. So that is my reason. And I think it's logical and sensible, and it doesn't fit within a manager in or out. These are the things I think need to happen because these are the things that are the problem. And that's been my position for a long time. If he keeps picking players, not based on merit, but purely based on experience, they will let him down. They can win next week, they'll lose the following. Show up next week, show up the following. That I don't want to see anymore. That I think he's responsible for. And in that way, I think he is lowering the standards of the club if there are no accountability for things like what we saw against Brentford. There must be accountability for senior players going into Brentford, sleepwalking, and playing like shit. There must be, or he has to leave. It was interesting. Just one quick thing, and then I'm going to end it here. Looking at the way that things are evaluated at like successful clubs versus ours and how they talk about it and stuff. Look at this quote from The Athletic. The 90 minutes were a reminder to Xabi Alonso that matching opponents for intensity and competitive spirit is the first requirement before technical quality and tactical sophistication can make the difference. The first requirement. Look at how that's said by people at The Athletic. When do we get that? Because that's my point. And that's a successful club. This is after Madrid got plastered by Atletico yesterday. The first requirement is matching opponents for intensity and competitive spirit. We didn't do that against Brentford. We didn't do that against City. We didn't do it against Fulham. We didn't do it against Grimsby. This is what I mean by the on-again, off-again players. They do not match that. There was absolutely no intensity against Brentford. And that, if you don't have that, it's not worth discussing quality and tactics. That's my stance. People, when they evaluate Madrid, say the same thing. They understand that. They get that. That's a successful club. Oof, off the post. I have the same assessment of football. That's how I view football. You must, if you're not going to be intense, if you're not going to show up with the same energy, then the rest of it is pointless in discussing. And that's the biggest thing there has to be consequences for. Not playing with intensity, not playing with determination. That is still missing at the moment. Okay? All right, guys. Thanks for watching today. I'll let you know if I hear anything else. Please do like the video on the way out and all of that. And I will see you all later, all right? Have a good rest of your Sunday. I might make a video later. I don't know. Or not, if there's anything worth. I'll tomorrow for sure. I will be breaking down and doing a tactics video on this. I will be doing that. Tomorrow podcast won't be fun. And then red carpet, and then maybe another live as well. Okay? See you later, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.